What's the most intelligent thing you've witnessed an animal do? I had a cat that somehow knew when I switched off my cochlear implants. Whenever my doorbell rings, she'd come up to me where I can see her meow at me. Then she walks up to the door looking back to see if I'm following her. I never taught her that. R.I.P. Nix. I'll use the same story I used for another unrelated question on here. While unintelligent in actions, it takes some kind of intelligence for an animal to know how to play games. I witnessed two crows perched up on the light post outside my house playing what I can only describe as a game of chicken. They both would jump off the light post simultaneously and free fall towards the ground and fly off at the very last second. My guess is whoever got closer to the ground won that round, but who knows. Well, on one of their attempts, one of the crows waited too long and smacked right into the ground lol. It got up and flew back to the top of the pole. But to this day it's the funniest damn thing I've ever witnessed. And it was one of those things I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own two eyes. I had this mutt beagle mix. One time I was making a sandwich, and he was begging for food. I promptly told him to go away. With a defeated look in his eye, he starts to walk away. All of a sudden his ears pop up and he starts barking at the door and sits in front of it. He always did this if someone was at the door. I put my sandwich on the counter and go to the door to unlock it. Once I get to the door, the little ducker bolts across the room, jumps on the counter, grabs the sandwich and runs and hides. I was even that mad I was impressed. When I was a child, my friend and I were rounding up sheep with our fathers and the dogs. It was a hilly area and we were pushing them down a gully into the yards. One of the dogs took off over a hill and about 15 minutes later it met us back near the yards with 15 extra sheep that were missed. My Siamese cat once opened a cupboard in the kitchen and dragged a sealed bag of cat food into the lounge for me to open because I'd forgotten to feed her. My basset hound and cat have become codependent when hunting. They'll approach a pile of firewood with a rat's nest in it and the dog will bark and move around the wood to scare out the rats, while the cat hides ready to pounce. Once the rats try to escape, the cat catches them and they each take a rat for dinner. We've taught our cat to get bugs for us. She can be anywhere in the house and if someone yells bugs she comes running and takes care of it. Maybe not the most intelligent thing in the world, but it's pretty helpful. My dog learning to open the baby gate and then close it behind her. Once when feeding bread to ducks, I know, this was a while back and we know better now. A heron came up, took some bread, threw it in the water, and grabbed the fish that came up to eat the bread. My old cat Blackjack liked going outside late at night, but we didn't have a cat flap at the time. He would scratch at the door, but sometimes we couldn't hear him, so he kicked it up a notch. While stood on his hind legs, he would scratch with both paws on the door, whilst also hitting the letter slot in the door. It was spring-loaded and not exactly quiet. After a few weeks of scratch 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 bang on repeat at 3 AM, my dad installed a cat flap. I was crossing a huge frozen river in the winter. The ice was about 1.5 foot in thickness, but some areas had low density. It was my dog, myself, my friend, and my friend's dog. My friend crossed first and had one of her legs break through the less dense ice, but she made it. I then watched her dog cross very nervously and carefully in roughly the same path and not crack the ice. Then came my turn. I actually sent my dog to go first. He sniffs the ground and goes to cross, but he takes this weird scribbly path instead of going just straight. I ended up following him and noticed that the ice was the most densest there. I cross without a problem. Yesterday I saw crows passing around a small plastic ball which they took away from a pigeon. World Cup fever is everywhere. My dog places one of her squeaky toys near a small hole between our fence and the neighbors. She then squeaks it and waits for the dog next door to approach in anticipation of retrieving the toy just so she can bark at him and be an asshole. Edit. Till there are so many asshole pets out there. We helped rehabilitate a crow when I was a child. It had fallen out of its nest. The nest was much too high for us to return it, and my parents rescued it just in time since there were some neighborhood cats getting ready to pounce on and eat it. So we took care of it till it could fly and take care of itself. It was an incredibly smart bird, very social, and it enjoyed pranks. Its favorite prank was to wait till someone was sitting on one of the lounge chairs. Then it would walk under, reach up through the slats and pinch their butt with his beak. It would do this to many people, but it had one particular person, a friend of my parents, that it seemed to enjoy targeting. She had the best reaction where she would come leaping out of the chair to see what had gotten her. Every time. The crow enjoyed that so much that it didn't care if other people were sitting around. It would always look for her. It was not because she had been mean to the crow. She was a nice lady. The crow just legitimately enjoyed messing with people, and her in particular. I also had a dog that taught herself how to open the refrigerator, open the pantry, and break out of the car. My parents had to baby-proof the house food supplies against a dog. I was at my nan's house once, and she is a big admirer of wildlife. Big or small, feathered or not, she liked them all. One day she mentioned she had a regular crow visit her that she fed. He would caw if there wasn't any food in the garden, and my nan would oblige him, she says. Sure, I thought until I saw what she was chucking to him. I presumed nuts or seed. But no, slices of bread. Now the crow couldn't carry it away, and he didn't want to eat it out in the open, and in my nan's and my presence. This crow stands on one side of the slice, folds it over and tries to fly away with it, but no, still too big. So it does the same again, so that it can actually grasp a hold of it this time, and proceeds to fly away with it all folded up. Me stood there slack-jawed at what I just saw. The birds are smarter than they appear, people. Whenever I'll let my dog dictate the walk, the go sniff command, where I'll let her lead and give the full extent of the leash, she will walk me to the local pet store 100% of the time. I have a Senegal parrot, and if I put a plastic bottle cap in his cage, he'll put it in his beak, scoop it full of water out of his water dish, and then sit on his perch and hold it in one claw and sip out of it like it's a cup of coffee. I have no idea where he learned this. I have a Maine Coon, and we lived in a ghetto apartment in Georgia. In the summertime it gets hot, so my cat started jumping on top of the fridge and using his back foot to kick open the top of the freezer door, jump down inside the freezer, and take cool naps. Clever little shit. My mom was in her bedroom reading one night, and her cell phone started ringing in the other room. Our dog, totally of her own accord, got up, went into the other room, picked up my mom's ringing phone, brought it back to the bedroom and dropped it in her lap. My childhood kitten hurt her paw once and was limping for a week. She got spoiled a ton and granted many privileges. Her whole life, after any time she wanted anything, she'd hold up one paw and pretend limp. When I was a kid, our cat Duncan would jump onto the desk, very gently take one tissue out of the box, and place it over the edge of his food dish before eating. That chubby orange bastard had better manners than I did. I saw an orangutan point at a zookeeper, then proceed to say, in sign language, banana. I lived in the same apartment complex as a friend, but in different buildings. I lived on the first floor, he lived on the second. The buildings were designed so that you had to open a door to go inside to the central hall, where the front doors of the individual apartments were located. Additionally, the apartments had glass patio doors, which had hanging blinds. So my friend brought his cat over to my apartment one time, carried the cat from his building, across the parking lot, into my building, and through the front door, and then later carried him back home. That was the only time the cat was ever in my place. Some time later, his cat managed to get outside, Presumably because my friend is a bit of an idiot. I didn't know this, but I started hearing a weird squeaking noise, and in trying to track it down I moved the blinds on the patio door to look outside. There was his cat, pawing at the glass door, who somehow figured out how to find my apartment from the outside, despite the fact that he couldn't even see in, or had ever been through the patio door.